Good evening and welcome to another segment of 360 Degrees to Success. I'm Jeffrey Bloom and I have a great couple episodes here. Actually, this is going to be a two-parter with my special guest, Jeffrey Deskovic. Jeffrey is also one of the research consultants and continuing on 360 Degrees to Success, along with an associate producer. It's been really a privilege and an honor to know Jeff, and we've become friends over the years. And his story is nothing short of amazing. And if you don't think, or if you think that people who are innocent don't confess to crimes and go to jail for it, you're sadly mistaken. I thought that. Even when I first met Jeff and I saw him on another TV show, and he was talking about confessing to a crime that he didn't commit and spent 16 years in jail, I'm sitting there saying, yeah, right, you know, just another one of those stories. But these things really happen. And I really got to know Jeff over the last 3 or 4 years, talking to other exonerees. Jeff's featured in this book, Anatomy of Innocence. If you pick up a copy of that, it's just, you read through it, you just can't believe it. Prosecutorial misconduct, things that go on in the system. You can find more information, Jeff, on the 360 Degree website. That's 360degrees-to-success.com. Jeff Deskovic has his own page on there. And Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff. I'm really looking forward, not just to this episode, but working with you in general. As you mentioned, we've known each other for a number of years now, and you've always come to a lot of my events, and I've admired your work from afar, but really excited just to be more involved in depth now.
Thank you very much. And everybody likes a success story, people who've overcome adversities to be successful, and here's a perfect example. Jeff just finished his second year of law school at Pace Law School. He speaks all the time, and not only does he speak all the time, when he's not speaking, he's going to school and vice versa. And he has really great grades, and he's just an amazing guy, and I respect him a lot. So Jeff, if you don't mind, telling your story and what happened.
Sure, absolutely. So I was arrested in 1990 at age of 16 for a murder and rape that I did not commit. My wrongful conviction was caused by a coerced false confession, prosecutorial misconduct, fraud by the medical examiner, a terrible public defender. I was convicted despite a pre-trial negative DNA test result which showed that semen found in the victim didn't match me. Ultimately, I was sentenced to a 15 to life sentence, out of which I'd served 16 years. I lost 7 appeals. I got turned down for parole before ultimately being exonerated through further DNA testing via the DNA data bank, which not only exonerated me, but identified the actual perpetrator.
And when we get into Jeff's story, probably part 2 will be a little bit more on, although we'll touch on the prosecutorial misconduct. But what's amazing is all these years that Jeff was in, he never gave up his case. And he would get denied on paperwork that was 3 hours late being submitted, crazy stuff. Who was the judge that you told me about who kind of stood in your way, who's very famous?
Oh, yes, I remember that. So my lawyer, when I filed the appeal on the federal level, a habeas corpus petition, my attorney got the wrong information from the court clerk that resulted in the paperwork arriving 4 days late, which the court deemed to be more important than the fact that I was arguing my innocence. So the DA at the time was Janine Pirro, who's of course a judge on television now. And so when I lost strictly on being late, I appealed that decision to the Federal Court of Appeals, where Judge Sotomayor affirmed that ruling. So she agreed with that lower ruling, court ruling, not once but twice, denying my re-argument motion also. And so really, in essence, that ruling wound up costing me 7 years additional imprisonment before I was eventually exonerated.
That's amazing. And Jeff was nowhere near the place where this crime happened, and he was 16 years old at the time when he was, or 15?
I was 16 years old. So I mentioned at the beginning, what the causes were of the wrongful conviction. So I kind of want to unpack those. Starting with the confession.
Yeah. So can you explain to the viewers how does somebody who wasn't even there, who didn't have nothing to do with it, and when they called you in to question you and or the trial, you figured, hey, I didn't do it, no problem. How does it come to where you confess to a crime? How does that happen? Sure.
So for about 6 weeks, the police played this cat and mouse game with me, in which when they spoke to me, the interactions always took on the dynamic of half the time they would speak to me pretending like they needed my help to solve the crime, and other half the time they would talk to me like a suspect. So they would say things like, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. let us know if you hear any rumors, stop in from time to time. They would ask me opinion questions and congratulate me on my opinion being correct. They made me the center of attention. So eventually, and by the way, that intersected directly with my fantasy childhood career. What I wanted to be when I grew up was a cop.
Well,
So this unexpected early opportunity to do this quasi-police work, along with my age, 16, was how they were able to pull the wool over my eyes. That also intersected with another aspect of my life. I came from a single-parent household, so my father was never involved in my life in any capacity, and that interacted with the good cop, bad cop technique, in which one officer takes on a more aggressive role and the partner pretends to be a friend who's opposed to what's going on, that get powerless to intervene. So
not only that, but they called you in, didn't notify your parents or your mom at the time.
Right.
Didn't provide any type of counsel to you, so you're not even emancipated. You're still a minor, and
Correct.
then you are. For how many hours did they interrogate you for?
Sure, so they did this cat and mouse game for 6 weeks, and then they got me to agree to take a polygraph test. And so the next day, instead of going to school, I went to the police station for the test. And so they drove me from Peekskill, which is in Westchester County, they drove me across county lines, about 40 minutes away to the town of Brewster, which is in Putnam County. So my parents thought that my mother and my grandmother thought that I was in school, so they didn't call around looking for me. I had no attorney present, they didn't give me anything to eat the entire time I was there.
Which was how many hours?
That was 6.5 to 7 hours.
Oh, okay.
So they put me in they gave me a brochure about how the polygraph worked, but it had a lot of big words I didn't understand. But then I thought, well, no big deal, let's just get on with this.
Right, you didn't do it, what's there to worry about?
Yeah, exactly. So he gave me the polygraphist, Daniel Stevens, gave me countless cups of coffee, which seems pretty clear. The purpose of that was to get me nervous. And then he attached me to this polygraph machine, so now I'm immobile in a small room. And he launched into his third-degree tactics. So he raised his voice at me, he invaded my personal space, he kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And he kept this up for 6.5 to 7 hours, getting more and more ferocious as time went on, so my fear kept increasing in proportion to the time. So eventually he said, I guess he was exasperated by his inability to get me to confess. He said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the polygraph test results that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." And so that really shot my fear to the roof. And that's when the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and he told me that the other officers were going to harm me, that he was holding them off but couldn't do so any longer, that I had to help myself. Then he added if I said as I wanted that they'd stop what they're doing, that I could go home afterwards, that I was not going to be arrested. So being young, naive, frightened, 16, in fear of my life, the fact that I didn't know where I was and that nobody else knew where I was either really loomed quite large in my mind, and being overwhelmed emotionally and psychologically. And then the push-pull dynamic of the possibility of harm, and yet this false life preserver that he threw me. I made up a story based on information which he had given me in the course of the interrogation. So I collapsed into a fetal position on the floor, crying uncontrollably, and I was in fact arrested.
And like I said earlier in the show, that I always thought before I met you and got involved with your cause that just things like that didn't happen. Could you remember back at that point, to that time, did you have the same feeling that, things like that just don't happen? You're supposed to be able to trust the police, detectives. I mean, because you wanted to be a police officer. So
yes, I did have that. You're completely correct. Yes, I did have that in my mind that the police are good guys and our friends are there to protect us. Always tell them the truth. You can trust them. And in that particular instance, and unfortunately far too many instances, that trust is abused.
It is. So now you're in trial. So now you have the same mindset, which anybody would have. Hey, I didn't do it, no problem. And then the trial obviously ended the way it did.
Well, let me get into that a little bit, though. But so the DNA test result didn't match me before trial. It showed that semen found the victim didn't match me.
Okay.
Which is strong. They should, by all rights, the case should have stopped. But the prosecutor kept going with the case, and he got the medical examiner to commit fraud in order to counter the DNA. So basically, he got the medical examiner to claim, "Oh, I found medical evidence showing that the victim had been sexually active." So that opened the door for the prosecutor to argue it didn't matter that the semen didn't come from me. She might have had sex with someone else before she was murdered and raped by me. right? Which is absurd because if that was true, then at a minimum there would be the semen of two people.
Absolutely.
Right, and also I want to share, just to re-emphasize and prove that this was a fraud, the medical examiner only came up with this claim 6 months after doing the autopsy, 6 months after taking notes. He suddenly remembered hundreds of autopsies later that he found this medical evidence. So he only made this up in order to assist the prosecutor. Now, in terms of my public defender, I mean, he was terrible. He never interviewed or called as a witness my alibi. I actually was playing wiffle ball when the crime happened. He very rarely met with me. When I tried to explain to him that I was innocent what happened in the interrogation room, he was always shutting me up. He should have never represented me in the first place because of a conflict of interest.
Which was?
Which was that the prosecutor, to go along with the medical examiner's lie, the prosecutor mentioned another youth by name that he claimed had likely had sex with the victim. But he never called that other youth as a witness to prove it. He didn't do a DNA test. He made the unsupported argument to the jury. My lawyer was supposed to call him as a witness, but he couldn't because the other youth was represented by another member of legal aid. So that prevented the defense from exploiting the myth in that way.
And a 16 who would know any better, right? You would know.
Right. And I don't know. I've never been arrested. I don't know anything about a trial. And then another thing was that when it was time to cross-examine the medical examiner, I mean, Jeff, any of your viewers right now would know it would be important in this case to discredit the medical examiner,
or at least drill him, right?
Right. Well, try to. You got to try to discredit him. But my lawyer never asked him a single question. He stood up in court and said, "You're going to be pleased to know that I don't have a single question for you." Then my lawyer never explained to the jury what the significance of the DNA not matching me was. He never used that to argue that the DNA exclusion proved that this so-called confession was coerced and false. He basically didn't defend me. He wouldn't allow me to testify either.
And he said if you had to do over again, you definitely would have testified.
1,000%.
To show how you were...
How I was coerced, because the cops, the interrogation was not videotaped, it wasn't audio taped, there was no signed confession, just the cops' word. So they were able to get on the stand and leave the threat and false promise out of their testimony. So I wanted to take the stand to put those facts on the record, but he wouldn't allow me to. And in the end, I was ultimately wrongfully convicted.
And even worse than that, even though the judge has the power, you said to the judge, that you were innocent. There was no, DNA. He could reverse the decision of the jury. And what did the judge say to you?
Yeah, he said to me, maybe you are innocent, right? And you might think that would lead him to utilize his power to overturn the conviction, which he could have do.
What's that called? I forgot what that term's called when a judge overturns.
He could have set aside the conviction. Yeah, he could have done that by reversing any of the rulings that he had made against me in the course of the trial. So he had the legal means to do it, but he didn't do it, and he took the easy, politically expedient way out, which was to sentence me to a term of imprisonment of 15 to life, which I was sent to a men's maximum security prison at the age of 17.
Wow, that's amazing. And in stories like Jeff's and others, and again, referring to the book Anatomy of Innocence, you read this book, and there's one case in particular, not to get away from Jeff's story, but just to give you an example, there's a case in there where somebody who's wrongfully convicted was guilty of another crime, or he was on house arrest at the time, with an ankle bracelet. They knew where he was and convicted him of a murder in another state.
Yeah,
and he had an ankle bracelet on. How do you even try to make that argument? But these are just kind of things that go on, which we'll get into part 2 when we talk about the prosecutorial misconduct. But it boggles the mind.
Absolutely. So at this point, I really would like to walk our audience through the appeals process, because I very naively thought that the court system got more accurate as the higher up you went, the better it got.
Okay.
Or so I naively thought.
And you did a lot of your own paperwork and research while you were in prison?
Yes. So I started learning the law. Another prisoner encouraged me to go to the law library and learn the law. So I did that, and I started doing some of my own research and was sending my notes to the court-appointed attorney, a different one who was assigned to me for my appeals. So I appealed conviction to the appellate division, where my issues quickly were that the statements were taken in violation of my Miranda warnings, that they were involuntary, that there was legally insufficient evidence of my guilt, that the prosecution hadn't proven guilt beyond reasonable doubt, and that the verdict was against the weight of the evidence. Obviously, all those three centered around the DNA.
Right.
And also, there was 7 other issues of law which are really not that relevant. So the court ruled that I was not in custody, even though I was dependent upon the cops. I was transported to another county. I was 16 years old. I had no money. I didn't know where I was.
Sounds like custody. That's law school 101, right?
I couldn't leave if I wanted to, but they ruled that I was not in custody. I was free to come and go as I wished. They ruled that the statements were voluntary. They ruled that there was overwhelming evidence of guilt, which is still kind of a head scratcher. And then they dismissed the rest of my issues with one sentence by saying, we've examined appellant's remaining issues and find them either to be without merit or not preserved for review. So as crazy as that decision is, that's the most substantive decision I got in 7 appeals.
Now, I'm sorry, from the time you went to prison, when did you first start submitting appeals? At what point through your term?
Sure. So it took 4 years to get it. From late 1990 to 1994, I got the first decision denying me that decision right there. So my lawyer from there filed a re-argument motion, arguing that the decision was running contrary to the facts in the case law, but that was denied. The Court of Appeals, it's a bifurcated process. You have to ask permission to appeal to them before they'll give you a substantive decision. They declined to give me permission to appeal to them. I lost in federal court because the court clerk gave my lawyer the wrong date. He asked the wrong filing procedure, and so everything that came in the wrong date. 4 days too late. Then I appealed that ruling to the Federal Court of Appeals. My lawyer argued that the decision like that, to uphold it would cause a miscarriage of justice to continue, that overturning that would open the door to more sophisticated DNA testing, and that this was obviously a delay caused by the court clerk, not a deficiency by me or my lawyer, which, Jeff, I don't think you need the law degree to know that that's a really strong argument, right? Legalese aside. But the judge, Sotomayor and her colleague, Justice Rosemary Pooler, they upheld that decision. They denied my re-argument motion, and the U.S. Supreme Court declined to give me permission to appeal to them. So that marked the end of my appeals. By now we're up to 2001, so I got about 11 years in. So the next, the path, therefore, when your appeals are over, they don't give you a lawyer anymore because they figure you're not litigating. So I had to write letters for the next 4 years, barely getting an answer. I wrote hundreds of letters trying to find a lawyer who would take my case for free. Hope I could find an investigator as well, because the only path forward at that stage was to try to find some previously unknown evidence of innocence, without which I was permanently locked out of the court. So very rarely got any answers on that. I began to look at the parole board as a way of regaining my freedom. But I was denied parole as well, in part because I stood on my innocence rather than rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility.
And we know somebody else who had to do that, which we might get into in another show. But just to get out. But how many people out there? Here you are in prison 11 years. All your appeals are done. How many people would just say, "I'll give up. Screw it. I'm done." I mean, I just can't imagine what got you to, that's why I admire you so much, because it's just amazing that how many people would, out of 10 people, would you say 9 people would you just said, all right, screw it, I'm going to hang myself tomorrow in my cell and I'll be done with it?
Quite a bit would have, and it was a mental fight. I mean, I had to fight off thoughts of wanting to quit, helplessness, hopelessness. At times I entertained ideas of suicide. I didn't have the luxury of losing my mind, because I knew that nobody was coming to my rescue, and so I was going to have to go and recruit somebody that I didn't know already to try to build the bridge between me and the ultimate legal help I need. And to do that, I had to keep my wits about me, so I didn't have the luxury of just giving in a depression or quitting or losing my mind. Ultimately, I did get the. Well, I'll share because we're on the air, and this is what we're here for, to elaborate. And that's why the beauty of having 2 episodes.
Right.
So I wrote, one of the letters I wrote to a book author. There was a book called Chicken Soup for the Prisoner's Soul, and it had like one chapter of many different books in it.
Jack Canfield series.
Correct, yes.
It was on my show last year.
I remember you shared that with me, yes. So I wrote the book author in care of the publishing house, and someone at the publishing house sent the letter not to the author but to an investigator, and the investigator wrote me back. That was Claudia Whitman, And she basically, in a nutshell, said, look, I live in Colorado, I live in Maine, I can't work on your case directly, but I will network for you. I'll try to connect you to the legal help. She became motivated to do that when I sent her a copy of the appeal brief showing that the DNA didn't match me, because she couldn't believe it, because it was such an unheard of thing. Everybody was being exonerated left and right based on DNA. And here it is, I'm in prison with a negative DNA test result.
Right.
So ultimately, she got the Innocence Project to take my case. I have to give Maggie Taylor credit as well, who was an intake worker at the Innocence Project then, because she pushed my case. Like, the Innocence Project decided not to take it twice because I was already excluded by DNA. So she got them to ultimately take it.
Was Maggie the one that was at the CUNY event, the John Jay College?
Yes, when I got the award.
The award,
The award, yeah, the 2018 Distinguished Alum Award. Yeah, she was there. She got them to take my case, and ultimately they got the then Westchester County District Attorney, Janet DeFiore, who's a Court of Appeals judge now. They got her to agree to give me additional DNA testing because the data bank had been created. And so they took the crime scene DNA evidence, which already didn't match me, and they entered into the data bank, and it matched the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was in that data bank because he killed a second victim 3.5 years later as a result of being left free while I was doing time for his crime.
So 3.5 years after this murder you went for, they found him?
Yes, because he killed the second victim.
Killed the second victim. So at your 4-year point, that should have been another reason to say, wait a second, we got the wrong guy, but you're still there.
But I'm still there, yes. And so the DNA matched him. He also confessed to the crime, not just to a district attorney investigator, but also to a reporter on video camera. In fact, that confession is viewable on YouTube. People go to YouTube and type Deskovic Foundation, Cunningham confesses. The confession is confession there. So just to be clear, no false confession there. All right?
Right.
DNA matched him. He confessed to a reporter on camera. There is no false confession. So my charges were dismissed on actual innocence grounds, agreed to by the district attorney, and my legal team was in agreement with the district attorney.
So you sent to prison for a crime you didn't commit.
Yes.
So 4 years later, this guy confesses and the DNA matches and everything like that.
Well,
But should have been another.
Well, no. 4 years, no, 3.5 years later, he committed a second murder.
Right.
Not this one. He didn't confess to the crime he committed that I was doing time for. He only confessed to that 16 years later after the DNA
Oh,
matched.
gotcha, okay.
So, I mean, honestly, at that point, it didn't matter if he confessed or not. I mean, the DNA matched him and the gig was up.
Right.
Yeah, so it wasn't like by any means he stepped up and did the right thing.
Now, Jeff, you're also featured in a movie that you were all over the place in Manhattan and the counties and I think Washington, D.C.
And different states as well.
Different states as well, and talking about, how to survive
Yes.
prison or how to,
Yes.
what to do. So now you have the experience to prevent something like this from happening. Can you want to talk about that a little bit?
I certainly would, yes. So it's called The Survivor's Guide to Prison, and it's available on Netflix as well as Hulu and other online platforms.
And there's some stars in there too, other than yourself, right?
Yeah, if you want to consider me a star at all, which I don't, but but it's your world. Say what you want. So Danny Trejo is there, Danny Glover, Ice-T, Ice Cube, Susan Sarandon narrates along with the executive director and producer Matthew Cook, and so I'm executive producer of that. And then also I have a part in it, so I'm talking about prosecutorial misconduct. And then there's been a number of talkback sessions that happen after the film is shown, where myself and other people we speak about the movie and we take field questions. So yeah, I mean, The Survivor's Guide to Prison is one of the projects I'm really proud to have been associated with.
It was a good movie. It was, and Jeff, talking about what you would do in hindsight, or if you went to do it again. Excuse me. You had told me, because we talk all the time, and that again, a theory is if you go in for questioning, why not answer
Yes.
if you didn't do it? But you said that only hurts you. That if you had to do over again, you would have remained silent. You would have gotten an attorney.
Well, right. So what I said is, when the police want to speak with you, beyond giving your name and where you live, you should ask for an attorney. And a lot of people think, well, if you're innocent or you don't know anything about a crime, why
Makes
not
sense,
just speak
right?
to the police?
Yeah.
And look, hey, it's going to make you look guilty, isn't it? And what
Exactly.
what do I need a lawyer for?
That's what I thought.
But actually, you need a lawyer for quite a lot of legitimate and valid reasons. That
And it's a
ridiculous.
shame that it's like that. You think it'd be just like you said, and like I thought.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't do it, no problem, ask me whatever you want to.
But it's crucial, right? But it's crucial to not waive your rights. To ask the lawyer to ask for the lawyer. They have to provide that too. That'll level the playing field. It'll stop them from being able to coerce you. And you know, hey, I wish if I could do it all over again, I would have asked for a lawyer. I would not have waived my rights. And then at the trial, I would have definitely testified.
So in the few minutes we got left, this show also supports the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation. And Jeff has a mission in regards to his 501c3 nonprofit to get funding, because he has people come to him all the time needing the help of his organization, but it's very tough when you don't have the funds to do that. I was at an event with Jeff a couple weeks ago at Sing Sing for graduation, which we're going to get into.
Yeah, Hudson Link.
Hudson Link.
I'm a big
That's
supporter of
one of
that.
our coming guests, and we're going the 19th to a prison to talk to somebody else who kind of needs your help, but you're going to talk to her.
Mhm.
However, funding is kind of preventing what you do. So talk about that kind of goal you have where everybody
Sure.
gives, X amount or what you could do.
Absolutely. So I
And how many
started,
people you've helped so far?
right. So I started the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, whose purpose is to exonerate the wrongfully convicted and to prevent it from happening in the first place by pursuing policy changes. So I started the organization with a donation from with a personal donation from the compensation that I won through lawsuits. And we've been around for 5.5 years. We've exonerated 2 people, and we got another 5 out through other legal means.
It's amazing.
And so we have a crowdfunding site, a page. It's on Patreon, so if people Google Deskovic Foundation, Patreon, Patreon. So then a link will come up, they can click on it. So my dream is this, Jeff. My dream is to have 25,000 people who can afford $3 a month on a recurring monthly basis every month, and that would give us close to $1 million budget. And so I have everything outlined on the page, that all the additional personnel I would add, from lawyers to investigators to paralegals to an executive director, administrative assistant, somebody to raise funds. There will be some money for have a gala dinner. So the issue is that, I can't self-fund the organization. I mean, I did that for 3.5 years. I had to convert it to a volunteer organization now, and we have like 20 volunteers. There's like 5 lawyers who we pitch cases to that we've screened and outlined how to win them and whether they're wrongful conviction cases. But I'd like to keep the volunteers as just that, volunteers as supplemental, not as the main workforce. Because what happens is, like for the lawyers, what should take 6 months really takes 2 years. I'm sensitive to that additional waiting. The volunteers, eternally grateful for them, but they have paid jobs, they have personal lives, often they have families, so they squeeze work in here and there as they're able to. I would like to, again, have a staff. I'd like to have a robust staff, and so, again, all the components are there. So if anyone is moved by my story, wrongful convictions in general, they can, who can't afford $3 a month on a recurring basis?
Absolutely. And in the 2 minutes we have left, and again, our next show will be part 2, so stay tuned. What else did you want to say about your organization? Maybe a website, people to donate,
Sure.
or type things like that.
Yeah, so I would like to share the website. It's very easy, deskovic.org. That's DESKOVIC.org. What distinguishes us from similar mission organizations in the field, we handle not just DNA cases, but non-DNA cases. In fact, our 2 exonerations coincidentally happen to be in non-DNA cases. We advocate for policy positions that some of the other entities privately agree with us but won't articulate. And thirdly, we're the only organization started by an exoneree that has an exonerative component to it. So would love to hear from potential board members. We're always looking to add that. So if they go to our website, deskovic.org, they can email me. And I'd be happy to share more information about our total body of work and more about my story, where I want to take the organization at. It's a very soft sell. This is where I'd like to go. Can you help us? We have very specific things we're looking for from board members, and would love to get people involved in a great cause.
Look, it is a great cause. If you agree, $5 a month is not a lot of money, $3 a month, whatever it is, go check out the site. So again, Jeff will be a regular recurring guest on the show. Thanks again for tuning in. Stay tuned for part 2 coming up, and have a great evening.
All right, cut the mics, guys.